What's going on, everyone? So, Scream 7 is supposed to be a Sidney led film, right? Story, everything is supposed to kind of go around Sidney based on just kind of the rumors that are going out. That this film is going to be focused on Sidney, but it's also supposed to be focused on Gale Weathers. Now, here's the thing, right? Usually, Sidney Prescott is the target. And Ghostface has their motive, the rhyme, the reason to go after Sidney, and Sidney's got to survive. And the thought is that that's kind of how this is going to play out in the upcoming Scream 7. That you have Sidney, you have her children, you have her married to Mark Kincaid. Although, again, rumors are going around that Mark Kincaid and her children aren't going to have a big role in this film. Now, again, it's all just rumor. Take it with a grain of salt. Things can change, but that's kind of the consensus that's going around. Okay, right? Sure. So this is going to be a Sidney and Gale led film. Ghostface is going to be after Sidney for whatever reason, and that's that, right? Gale and Sidney will be on the case trying to take down Ghostface. That's the idea. What if this time it's a little different? Now, you could have Sidney be a lead. You could have Sidney be the main focus of the film and be kind of the girl in this film and be the kind of main character without Ghostface directly targeting her. So, what if Gale Weathers is actually the target? Or what if Gale Weathers is the reason that Sidney Prescott ends up getting involved? Now, I've explored several ways. Like I've made a video yesterday diving into could Gale be attacked early on? She has all of Dewey's stuff, right? Because they were married. Dewey's gone now. And in that stuff of Dewey is sensitive information about Sidney Prescott, right? And, you have Ghostface attack Sidney, or Gale. Gale makes it out. Gale survives. And then goes and lets Sidney know, right? That is definitely an option. I do think that there is several ways that you can kind of approach it. But, what if Gale, because here's the thing. Gale is in New York. Sidney is in Seattle. And this film is supposed to take place in Seattle. That doesn't mean that it begins in Seattle, though. It could begin anywhere. I mean, it could begin in Woodsboro. It could begin in Antarctica, right? It just at some point is going to shift and pivot and be focused in Seattle, which that's where Sidney is. So how do you get Gale and Sidney involved and in the same room and whatnot, right? I think that you could use Gale to kind of get Sidney involved now, because you look at the history of Scream, right? And the last Ghostface to actually target and go after Sidney was Roman in Scream 3, right? Scream 4, Jill wasn't after Sidney. Jill was just trying to be kind of the new Sidney and take the place and do this whole thing, right? And Sidney ended up coming out of the woodworks to promote her book and just happened to be there, right? And it caused this whirlwind. It was like, oh, now we can actually go after Sidney. Now I can take out Sidney and become her, right? And then Scream 5 had nothing to do with Sidney. It was about Sam. The only reason Sidney came out of the woodworks again to come help was because Dewey died, right? Scream 6, Sidney wasn't even involved. So how do you, why after 25 years or longer, because it's supposed to be a time jump, right? Why after all this time is Ghostface now all of a sudden going after Sidney Prescott, right? Well, maybe, what if Ghostface isn't? What if Ghostface is going after Gale, and now Gale doesn't have anybody? Gale's on an island here, right? You could another easy kind of inherent way would just be Gale and Sidney are living together, right? Because Gale nearly died in Scream 6. She, in my opinion, should have died in Scream 6 based on the attack that we saw her take. But, Gale doesn't really have anybody. Her little boyfriend ended up dying, and she doesn't have Dewey anymore. So it's where does she go to recover? You could have it be with Sidney. That would be an easy inherent way. But I just think that Gale, like, she's stubborn. She kind of beat herself. If she gets attacked or something happens, she might not have a choice but to be like, I need Sidney's help. Right? There's supposed to be a mention of Sam and Tara. It's very possible that mention is that, like, they've gone to, like, Tahiti or something like that. I don't know, some tropical place to, like, whatever. Right? Like, that is probably how this is going to play out. So Gale may end up being on this island and just go like, I don't have Dewey. Dewey can't help me. I only have Sidney, right? Like, I need her help. And she reaches out to Sidney, comes Sidney, and Sidney would go help Gale because it's Gale, right? Sidney and Gale have always had this kind of love-hate relationship. They have. But Gale, right, like, going to Sidney, like, Sidney's not going to turn her. Sidney's not going to be like, oh, that sucks. Right? No, she's going to, one, out of just respect to Dewey, she's going to probably get involved and want to help. And she just lost Dewey too. Right? Like, Sidney's, like, do you really think Sidney's going to be like, oh, man, like, I know I just lost Dewey, but Gale, that's fine. Like, no, she's going to be like, no, like, I need, like, Gale, you need help, I'm here. Right? And then she's going to go put her family somewhere safe and be like, all right, like, let's go. Or maybe Gale just shows up and Sidney's like, Gale, what are you doing here? And she's like, I got attacked or something. Or maybe, I mean, it doesn't even have to necessarily be that. I mean, what if Gale just goes to visit Sidney and Ghostface is targeting Gale, waiting for the opportunity, and Gale ends, they follow Gale to Seattle, and it's like, oh, wait a minute, Sidney's there. I mean, that's kind of how all the other movies have indirectly got Sidney involved, right? Like, Ghostface is after somebody else entirely, and then Sidney just either shows up or, just happens to get kind of thrusted into it, and it's like, oh, hey, cool, I get to take out Sidney too. Right? It's not just Gale or this time. Like, oh, man, she just led me to Sidney Prescott, right? So, like, kind of have that. I think you have Sidney who's not going to just, like, let Gale die, right? Like, so I think you could use Gale as the kind of jumping off point to kind of get Sidney involved. It's kind of a win-win across the board, right? And look, I'm all for kind of getting this, like, Sidney Gale dynamic duo. Let's have them take on Ghostface, right? Like, I think that'd be cool. I think it'd be a lot of fun to just kind of get that almost like buddy cop type thing, but with Sidney and Gale. Again, they've always had this kind of like love-hate relationship, right? Been this kind of like toxic, awkward relationship at times. But they've always had that bond. They've always had that connection. They've always had that, I think, hidden love for each other in a lot of ways. I mean, even in Scream 2, Sidney, like, stuck up for Gale. It's like, something, I'm paraphrasing, but some along the lines of, like, be careful, she saved our lives, right? Like, because, she's always had this, like, acquaintance style relationship with Gale. And you've seen the progress, you've seen the growth, you've seen the development of the two as far as characters go. And I do think that there is this opportunity there to really capitalize and maximize on their relationship and their dynamic and what they can potentially bring to the table. And I'm actually excited to see how this all plays out. But, I just, everything needs to make sense. Everything needs to add up. Right? I don't want there to be this thing where it's like, oh, well, that's stupid. Like, and I just think, why is Ghostface just randomly going after Sidney after all these years? Right? Like, to me, it would make sense that there is this, Ghostface isn't after Sidney. Ghostface is after Gale for whatever. Maybe Gale stumbled across something or stuck her nose somewhere where she wasn't supposed to, and now this is all unfolded. Right? So, again, maybe I'll elaborate a little more on, kind of an idea as to how Gale maybe becomes a target or whatnot. But, we'll see. We'll see how it all plays out. But anyway, as always, this is a discussion. Pass question on you. Let me know your thoughts and opinions down in the comments. Well, what do you think? How do you feel? What are your thoughts? Do you like the idea of, like, use Gale as the kind of catalyst to get Sidney involved, and Ghostface after Gale, not after Sidney, and boom, you have this whole story unfold. It makes sense why Sidney's now involved, and it's not this like, oh, well, that silly story. You know, do you think, no, like, just keep it straightforward? You know, Sidney's the target. Ghostface is going after Sidney. That's that. And, you know, maybe Sidney calls Gale. Right? There's a lot of ways that they can approach this and go about it. But, you know, we'll see. See how it all plays out. And I'd love to hear your thoughts and opinions down in the comments below. That being said, if you haven't liked this video, hit that like button. Helps me a lot. Helps me enjoy these types of videos, and I truly appreciate it. Not subscribe channel, what are you doing? Hit that subscribe button. Turn on the bell notifications. Appreciate y'all. See you in the next one. Thank you.